Hola, amigos, amigas, welcome back, ¿qué tal? Great to see you all here. If you're waiting outside, now is the time to come in. You've reached the grand finale of the Banco Sabadell stage here at 4 years from now at the Heart of Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. My name's Oisin Lunny. I'm a podcast host for Fortune 500 companies, an event MC, marketing consultant, and occasional DJ. If you connect with me on LinkedIn, I will send you a mixtape. So let's connect. Let's build the 4 years from now network all over the world. Okay, I promised a grand finale, and here it is. You're going to meet a very special individual. Throughout his life, Jim Mckelvey has started ventures across a wide range of sectors, ranging from Block, formerly known as Square, to a glass-blowing studio, passing through Fintop, a fintech-focused fund, or indeed the non-profit LaunchCode. And he is going to be interviewed by a great friend of ours. He was on the stage yesterday, and he's a wonderful, wonderful moderator. He is a technology reporter for CNBC in London, covering a range of topics from fintech to video games. Ryan holds a BA in English Literature from the University of Westminster and journalism accreditation from the National Council for the Training of Journalists. Ladies and gentlemen, two gentlemen are going to join us on the stage right now to talk about building an unbeatable business, one crazy idea at a time. Absolutely magnificent. Please give the loudest welcome of the day, because we're reaching the end of the debate. Please welcome to the stage Ryan Brown, tech reporter from CNBC, and Jim Mckelvey, co-founder and director of Block, formerly Square.
Hello everyone, thanks very much for joining us. I'm very glad to say we are joined by a very interesting chap here, Jim Mckelvey, a co-founder of Block, formerly known as Square. Jim, to kick the conversation off, I mean, obviously the topic is about, starting a business one crazy idea at a time, and I'm very curious to know what was the crazy idea or event that sort of led to the creation of Square?
So I'm a glassblower. I'm a guy who basically makes stuff that nobody needs. And I was in my studio one day trying to sell a piece of glass, and a lady tried to buy it, but she only had an American Express card. And I lost the sale because I couldn't take an Amex card. And I was frustrated, so I called up my friend Jack, so Jack Dorsey, who's my co-founder. Jack and I had already agreed to start a company together because we'd worked together years ago, and he'd just been kicked out of Twitter for the first time. So I called up Jack and I was like, could we build a product just for me so I can get paid? And so that was the beginning of Square. It was this idea of just a simple tool set that was really targeted to a problem that I personally had. And now I'm actually really happy to say that Square is live in Spain. So we've finally made it to, to Spain after a while.
And it's certainly come a long way. And I mean, the development of Square as well, I mean, from where I guess it was when you founded it to where it is today, I mean, it's obviously, it's a phoenix. It's been reborn as Block, as we now know it.
Look, the core efforts of the company haven't changed. What's happened is that the company grew multiple different layers. So we had Cash App, we had TBD, we got Tidal, and it no longer made sense for Square, which his name was associated with payments, to sort of be the holding company for all this other stuff. So we just decided that Block was a nice sort of generic name, and we would use that as the holding company for all these other things. So it wasn't like we were trying to distract everybody from something. We're still keeping the name Square, but Square is being used for the payment part of our business and not for the other parts.
Right, and obviously Square today and kind of its focuses, I mean, the whole change of the corporate group holding name to Block was obviously part of that focus on blockchain and Bitcoin. How do you are you a crypto believer, Jim? How do you kind of view the
crypto?
I
believe it exists, yes. No, I absolutely, look, I mean, here's the thing. Crypto's a super important evolution. Do I know where it's going to go? No. Are we building tools for the things that we think the world's going to need? Absolutely. We've got a whole division at Block that's dedicated to that. And we're doing it open source, so you can come and you can participate, and basically anything we build, we'll share. Because we think that the internet needs a native form of payment, and we think Bitcoin or something like it is going to likely be the thing that works. But we're very open-minded, and none of us can see the future.
And Square, you've mentioned how when you, early on in the business, I mean, there was a big threat from Amazon to the business, right? Amazon had created a competing product that undercut a product from Square. Tell me a bit more about that, How did Amazon nearly kill Square?
So if you're wondering what the title of this session is about, it goes back to a story that happened at Square back in 2014. So we were still a startup, and Amazon copied our product and undercut our price. And when Amazon does this to a startup, the startup dies. Like that happens 100%. If you're a startup and Amazon says, I'm going to copy what you're building and I'm going to sell it for less than you're selling it for, you're gone. And so when Amazon did that to Square, we were terrified. And so we looked at the things we could do to respond to Amazon, and there aren't too many things you can do, because we didn't have a brand like Amazon, we didn't have millions of users, we didn't have their bank account, we didn't have the things that they had, so we couldn't do what they were doing. So we just kept doing what we were doing and basically ignored them. And it worked, okay? So amazing thing, like a year after Amazon copied our product, they just gave up. And they actually were pretty cool about it. They mailed a Square reader to all their soon-to-be former customers. They said, we're out, use Square. And they just gave their customers one of our products. So that's the good news. But here's the bad news. I couldn't explain why. I had no idea why that happened. There was no precedent for it. And so I spent the better part of 2 years looking for other companies that had had that same thing happen to them. And I found that, in fact, there was this pattern, and it was actually rare but repeatable. And so that's where the title of this session is actually the subtitle of my book. So I wrote a book called The Innovation Stack. And it turns out, if you're a company, so I'll say you $15 right now. You don't have to buy the book. If you are a normal business, you copy a model that already works. So you find, you want to launch a cryptocurrency. Great. People have done that before. Just do what they've done. Copy what has been successful. The only time that doesn't work is if you're doing something that mankind has not figured out how to do yet. And the problem is, at least in the English language, we don't have a word to describe a business person who doesn't copy, who does something novel and new. We used to. It turns out that the word entrepreneur used to mean that, but that's a 150-year-old definition of the word. So when Schumpeter started using the word entrepreneur, that's what it meant. But these days, entrepreneur is just anyone who starts a business. So I start a coffee shop, which have been around for thousands of years. I'm an entrepreneur. So I saw this pattern, and I was like, oh my God, I gotta explain this. So that's why the book, and the idea here is that if you build an innovation stack, in other words, if you can build a business where you're not copying everything you're doing, then you're in this world where sort of the laws change, like the way you price your product changes, the way you hire people changes, the way you negotiate changes, like all these things that had been, that sort of work for normal businesses, don't work if you're an entrepreneur, in the traditional sense. A good example is this trade show, right? Everything at this trade show is known. Like you come to this trade show, you want to learn how to hook up 5G, there are 50 vendors here who will teach you how to do this, because we figured it out. You want to set up a 5G network? Go talk to that guy, right? It's a known thing. There's no trade show for innovation. Like if you're doing something that's novel, then you can't copy and the rules change.
So what do you do then? As you're starting, you want to start a business, you've got a rough idea of how you're going to go about it, what sort of vision you have in mind, but what do you do then? Do you go to VC money? How does that process work for you?
So venture capitalists follow a formula too. So I actually have a VC fund. So I got three VC, we're on our third fund. But we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars in companies. And let me tell you, venture capitalists have a formula. And if you're a good venture capitalist, you follow your formula. And your investors expect you to follow that formula. And if you deviate from that formula, they don't know what to do. So even VCs, if you're doing something truly innovative, are probably not going to want to fund you, because what you're going to do looks so unlike their formula, because it is truly new, that you won't get funded. So, so you end up in this weird world, and I think the best I can explain it is it's not a pleasant place to be truly innovating, because I think innovation has been mischaracterized. So what I mean by that, we've all been taught that it's good to be innovative, right? You should not follow the herd. Don't be part of the herd. But it turns out that we're herd animals. We're really good at behaving like everybody else. I mean, like, you're dressed like everybody. I mean, we're all sort of dressed similarly, you know? We all pretty much follow a set of behaviors that make it feel comfortable. The only reason you leave the comfort of the herd is because the herd doesn't have what you need. Like, there's something that the world doesn't have yet, and somebody's gonna have to build that for the first time. So let's talk about, aviation's a good example, the Wright brothers, all right? The Wright brothers were building planes before mankind knew how to build planes. And so there was a very good chance that they were gonna succeed fail and die. And so in that world, they couldn't go to some aviation trade show and look up, propeller design. They couldn't do the stuff that we could do now at an aviation trade show. I can go to an aviation trade show and get a whole blueprint for a propeller. If you're not allowed to copy, you're forced to innovate. And I say forced because it's typically very unpleasant. We as humans are not wired to be innovative. We are wired to be comfortable with our group. So the problem is, people think that innovation is supposed to be cool. And they've been sold this bill of goods by companies that are not really innovative, but they think, they make you feel like, oh, I'm not being innovative enough, I'm not being innovative enough. If you're not being innovative, good. Try not to be. It's a last resort. But it should be a last resort. It should be this thing that you do when you have to, because the world needs that new thing, and that's how we get the new things.
And obviously, here at MWC, I mean, everybody's trying to find the next new thing, right?
I don't think so. I think here, everybody's trying to copy what other people have figured out works.
Yeah.
I would bet you that almost everybody here is trying to copy somebody else's idea that's been proven.
And you co-founded Square, formerly Square, back in 2009. I mean, more than a decade ago. And since then, I mean, there's a plethora of similar payments providers, Stripe, and PayPal has been around for even longer.
PayPal was there before we were.
Yeah.
But we weren't copying PayPal. As a matter of fact, we looked at PayPal and we were like, they started 10 years before we did and hadn't really done anything new in 10 years. Like, they had no innovation. PayPal figured out how to get you paid through your email online. Great invention. But since then, they had done almost nothing.
Right. But when you look at that, the payments landscape or even any kind of tech industry, I mean, does it seem like much has happened since? Because now, obviously, there is a lot of chatter about Web3 and, of course, Stripe, companies like Stripe, and I mean, even Block to a certain extent is looking at crypto and blockchain as the kind of new path forward for financial services. I mean, is that where you sort of see the next, big thing coming from?
So innovation takes a couple of forms. It starts with this sort of breakthrough. And then once you have the breakthrough, it's refinement, refinement, refinement. Okay, so you look at the first airplane. The first airplane didn't have a tail. It had a thing in front, I forget what it is. It's like a canard, but the Wrights didn't call it that. But it's like a different design for an airplane. And then some guy, I think it was French, figured out that if you put a tail in the back of an airplane, it's way more stable, and you get this useful place where you can put cargo and people, and that's when we ride in an airplane, that's where you ride now. So it's been sort of refinement for the last 100 years in airplanes. Likewise, in mobile payments, we invented some of the early stuff, and people have started copying it, and that's how it should be. Like, they should be copying us. It turns out if you're the leader in one of these spaces, you can preserve that lead for a very, very long time if you follow a set of rules that I talk about in the book. But Square's not immune to this or anything, and I should say Block. Sorry, Block is not immune to any of this. And we're constantly looking for, where those next challenges are going to be, which is one of the reasons we're so into crypto. But it's not like we have this vision. And again, people are sold this idea that some of us are visionaries and other of us aren't. And at least, I've met a lot of people who've been called visionaries. Not so much, okay? Mostly, the term visionary is applied retroactively once you've been successful. So you make $1 billion, I call you a visionary. Okay, congrats. But generally, the future is this sort of murky cloud to all of us. And so the best you can do, even if you're a company as successful as Block, with thousands and thousands of smart employees, is you just walk in a direction you think there are going to be problems. Not opportunities, but problems. Like, what are real problems that you can solve for people? Crypto solves some real problems. It also creates some problems. So we need to build. And that's one of the areas we're looking at.
And crypto has obviously, even played a role in Ukraine, where crypto donations are now flooding into Ukraine. But at the same time, there's worries about how that could also be used by Russia to circumvent sanctions and things like that.
Kick Russia out of SWIFT, we might end up seeing them clearing stuff on the block. Yeah, because they're going to, good and bad, right? Depending on which side you're on, it's going to be good and bad.
Yeah, so it's kind of there's a double-edged sword, perhaps, that you have to navigate to kind of figure out what path you take in that particular sector.
Yeah, but to say something like that, like if I'm sitting here, I'm looking at this guy in the audience, right? And I'm thinking, what's he get out of a statement like this? Oh, the future's murky. Thanks, Jim. I came all the way to Barcelona to tell me that? No, for God's sake, it's vague. Here's something concrete that I think you could take away, which is that you, as somebody who your whole life has been taught to copy everything, and that is really how we become successful. That's how we live, by the way. I'm just a successful copy of, millions of ancestors. My DNA is a copy. I'm very good at copying. You're very good at copy. You're a successful copy. You're sitting there breathing. Like, all of us have been successfully copied from precursors, and there's nothing in this room is original. Like, this is an original chair. Nothing was invented here. We're all copies of copies of copies. So if you end up in a situation, which will happen a couple of times in your life, where you've got a problem that doesn't have a known solution, what do? Well, maybe you come up with a solution. Like, I got a little Easter egg for you in the audience, because I just built a new product that's a disaster, okay? But I'm going to let you try it with me later. But here's the thing. You may come up with some idea, and when you go to implement that idea, if it's truly new, if it's innovative, all of your friends are going to tell you not to do it, which is what they told, people were telling Jack and me when we started Square that we were idiots. As a matter of fact, I had payment executives one guy took me out to dinner and told me, and gave me specific reasons why we were stupid and we were going to fail, And he was absolutely right, because according to the existing models that he was using, we were dead. There was no way it was going to work. But it turns out the world changed between his models and what reality was when we built Square, and it worked. But if you do something innovative, people are going to tell you no. They're going to, the people who love you and care about you the most are going to tell you, stop, don't do that. So the reason I wrote this book, the reason I come to these conferences, the reason I talk about this stuff, is because I don't want talented people who are sitting on that edge between what is known and unknown to hesitate, as I did, and still do, okay? Because we've been taught that we're supposed to be sort of better than normal if we're innovative, or visionaries, or any of that crap. And I'm no visionary. I'm not bold. I don't have any of this, I don't know, whatever sort of superlative you think, it doesn't apply to me. But I'm a guy who, when I get up to that line, sometimes I stumble and fall over it, and then I have to do something new. Or sometimes I'll jump. But I want more people to recognize that innovation is very uncomfortable. And if you're doing something that's not, copying the latest 5G crap that they're selling, but in one of these little booths here, where somebody's built something that nobody ever thought of before, they're really scared. They're really worried because they're not getting the validation from the herd. You don't get the validation until years later, until Amazon copies you, and then that's not the validation you want.
And obviously that's scary enough to have a big old tech company like Amazon.
I got the validation, it was horrible.
Another thing that's, I suppose, scary when starting a business, I mean, you were talking about the idea of failure and being told that the thing that you're pursuing won't work out. I mean, how do you deal with that as an entrepreneur, as a founder, getting past being told, you know, this isn't for us, this isn't going to succeed?
Well, in my case, I just ignored it, because I'm sort of used to that. I've done enough things in my life that people have told me were sort of stupid, that I at least have experience with having some of those go my way. Most of the time, the people who tell me it's stupid are right, okay? I don't think my average is even over 50%. But generally, I'm more comfortable with that sort of discomfort than a normal, maybe that is a superpower. Obliviousness. It wouldn't make a good graphic novel, but you know, there should be a character who just ignores reality and runs into walls and stuff. But I think that the real message here is that it's deeply uncomfortable to be in that position, but you can still function when you're uncomfortable. Just because what you're doing hasn't been done before doesn't mean it can't be done. And the one thing I hear most often from people who find themselves in positions where they're truly being innovative is they'll say stuff like, well, I'm not qualified. Like, I'm not qualified to do this. So Jack and I were not qualified to start a payments company. We didn't know anything about payments. I was a glass blower. Jack was a massage therapist, you know? I mean, his only professional credential is a massage therapist. I've got a degree in economics and a degree in CS, right? No finance in there at all. So what's our professional credentials? 0. What's our experience in payments? 0. What do? We start Square. Well, it turns out nobody who does something for the first time in human history is ever qualified, right? Were the Wright brothers qualified pilots? No, there was no such thing as a qualified pilot right now, or back then. You couldn't be, nobody had flown. So how are you going to know? It is still possible to succeed even if you're not qualified. And by definition, all progress is made by people who are not qualified. So just because you don't feel qualified doesn't mean you should disqualify yourself.
I'm curious to hear more about your background before Square, your time as a glass blower. But was Square the only business that, I mean, was that the first one you
I've had
founded?
dozens of businesses. So I started a company straight out of college. Actually, that's where I met Jack. Jack was my summer intern at a company that I still have. It's still running today, 30-something years later. No, I've started a lot of companies, and there's no real theme between them. I've done a bunch of weird things, except perhaps maybe that at the core of each of these companies was something that was frustrating me. There was something that bothered me personally, and I was like, there should be this solution. And when there wasn't the solution, I would get pissed off, and then I would say, well, I should just build that. And then sometimes I'd build it, and people would buy it, and sometimes I'd build it, and nobody would buy it. But more often than not, they'd buy it, and that's what sort of led to the companies. So that's how I started the glass studio. Like, I wanted a place I could blow glass, and there was no place in my hometown. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. And there was no glass studio to work in. And so my friend and I built one. And it's been a huge success, you know? And that's kind of where I was when I started Square.
And since you co-founded Square, Block,
yeah.
As we need to adjust ourselves to calling it, what have you sort of done since then? I mean, you know, you're still on the board of Square, Block,
yeah.
Sorry, of course, but I mean...
So I started a nonprofit to teach people how to program for free. It's called LaunchCode, and you can go, if you live in one of the cities where we operate, it's actually in-person education. So that was pretty cool. And then I actually got into your business a little bit, because you're a journalist. And about 5 years ago, a group of media companies recruited me to build a micropayment system for them. Because it turns out if you're a journalist, life sucks, because all of the money has been sucked out of the industry by the platforms, right? So what they used to do, they used to pay journalists a lot of money because the media companies made a lot of money. Then the platforms made a lot of money and the media companies were all starving. So I was basically recruited by all these starving media companies to build something that had never worked before. micropayments. So there are 3 ways you can pay for media. You can do subscriptions, you can do advertisement, and most of the stuff you consume is supported by ads, or you can do pay-per-view, and pay-per-view has never worked. So we've been trying to figure out a way to do pay-per-view. Now the cool thing about pay-per-view, if you do it at a very, very tiny level, it becomes something called micropayments, which are these tiny little amounts of money that you should be able to transact invisibly. In other words, you should be able to transact, you should have, what you should have, instead of Facebook telling you what news to read and what content to consume and what ads you're going to see. You should be doing that on your own. You should have your own agent that's working on your behalf to bring you all the content and on an a la carte basis pay for it. And if you do this, if you run the math, then people who actually make good content make way more money. And that's what we want. In other words, think about food, okay? So Barcelona has great food. But if we wanted to kill the quality of food in this wonderful city, all we would have to do is pass a law that says every meal is 20 euros, right? And you'd say, great, I'll go to a good restaurant tonight and it'll only cost me 20 euros. But no, because a good restaurant would close because they can't afford to put a really nice meal on the table for that. So what we're living in the media world is a world where all the creators are starving. All the people who make the content have to have side gigs where they like MC, you got to interview guys like, you got to drag your ass all over town. Like, you got to side gig.
Sounds.
It's terrible. Like, you should be paid more. If you're making great content, we should pay you more. And those of us who consume content right now have no voice because we're paying with our attention, which is super inefficient. So, Facebook and the platforms monetize a minute of your attention to a certain amount, and that's a lousy way for you to pay for your content. Maybe a minute of your attention is worth more than 4 cents. Maybe you'd like to pay 5 cents or 10 cents to somebody who makes something that's really good. So this is what we've been working on with Invisibly. And we're releasing our first product in 2 weeks. So if you go to invisibly.com, you will see the world's first news feed that's not a feed. And when I say feed, I know that a lot of non-English speakers. I'm from the Midwest in the United States. We have something called feedlots. Does anyone here know what a feedlot is? Yeah, where you fatten up cows. That's what a feedlot is. A feedlot is where we take cows before we're going to kill them, and we force them to eat corn, so they get really fat, and the beef gets good. And that's what a feedlot is. And let me tell you, the feed that you're being given in your news feed is exactly the same thing. It is being shoveled at you to get you to behave a certain way, because Facebook knows if they piss you off at a certain time, you will stay more engaged. Now, is that good for you to be angry? Probably not. Is it good for Facebook to be angry? Definitely, because you will stay on there. And one of the reasons we have so much political division is because of this. It's not that people naturally hate each other, it's that we're being trained to hate each other because we're being fed like cattle. So, invisibly.com, if you go, give me 2 weeks to get this thing out the door. But it'll be the first news feed where you can take any story in the English language and select it yourself. So we have 500 plus stories a day coming down from very reputable news sources and journalists. No paywalls, no ads, just a feed that you choose, not that's chosen for you. So that's one of the things we're doing.
And when you look at big tech, obviously as a startup, I mean, it must be...
Somebody started to clap there. Thank you.
Not over just yet. When you look at, big tech, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people in the crowd, if they're running startups and thinking, oh God, how do I compete with somebody like big tech? When you look at the market power that some of these companies have, I mean, obviously that's being scrutinized very heavily in regulators, both here in Europe and obviously across the Atlantic. Where do you think we're going to be in a year or 2 or 5 with these big tech companies? Are they going to be, in the same shape, or are they going to be broken up? What do you think the direction of travel is?
So we've had a lousy history in the US of breaking up big companies. Like, we kind of couldn't even break up AT&T 30 years ago, and we didn't break up Microsoft when they were abusing power. And we've sort of been lousy at that. So I'm not hoping that the government is going to all of a sudden rein in monopoly. And a lot of these, I mean, look, the platforms have proven that they can control elections. So the politicians are not really interested in sort of starting that fight in a lot of cases. So I don't think we can depend on a government solution, although I think it might happen, but I'm not hoping for that. But what I have seen is market solutions. I've seen the things where somebody, in one of those little booths, or maybe in this audience, comes up with a product that nobody thinks is worth anything, that's actually really innovative. And then other people agree with them. And so, it's crazy stuff like that. So do you want an example of something? We got a minute left. You want to hear the stupid thing that I did?
Go for it.
Okay. So I was getting so much crap. So remember when email was great? Like when you first used email. You guys are too young, but like, yeah, you there. Yeah, the guy in the back, right? When you first got email, it was awesome because you could communicate with everybody instantly. It was fantastic. And then it got crummy when the spammers found you, right? So it was great, got terrible. And then Gmail comes along and it has a good spam filter and all of a sudden email gets great again. But over the last 15 years, the Gmail spam filter, which is still good, has been figured out by all the spammers. And now there's this like second level spam. And I get like 100 of these emails a day. It's like somebody like, hey Jim, I saw you at MWC, you gave me your email. Like, no, you downloaded off some blog or something. Like these people like pretend to know me. So I wanted my own paywall, right? Because that paywall's pissed me off, so I wanted my own paywall. Like, I'll be on the other side of that wall. So I built my own personal email paywall. So now if you want to email me, it costs you a nickel. And it has taken my spam to zero. Like the only people who, like anybody who emails me will hit this paywall. So if my email is jim@invisibly.com, all right? And since I know any of you, you're going to hit the paywall. And it's going to say sign up. And I don't know if we have enough licenses for everybody to try this, but I'm just telling you, like this is a stupid product, folks. Like charging people to email you, but it's something that I personally wanted because I just want clarity. I just want my inbox to shrink to only people who care enough to pay a nickel or people I already know. So if I already know you, you're whitelisted and your stuff comes through. But if I don't know you, you hit a paywall because, buddy, I don't know who the hell you are. Right? And if it's not worth it, if what you have to say to me is not worth 5 cents to you to have me see it, screw you. Go away. I don't want to talk to you, ever. But I have to do this 100 times a day, so I wrote a script to do this. So we have a little, so this is the sort of stuff. This is the sort of stuff that I think will take down a platform. Like it's just individuals acting irresponsibly on their own behalf. Something will bring us back to what we need.
Well, I think that's a good note to leave it on, Jim. And in fact, that idea has inspired me as a journalist who receives probably hundreds of pitches every day. I mean, you're tempting me now to start charging.
You can come to paywall. so just to be clear, if you actually try to download this thing, we're going to make you send us, I've only got 100. Look, I hacked this thing together, all right? I've only got 100 licenses. Google, because after that, Google makes me like get the thing approved, and the plugin is, I have to go through this 2-month approval process for Google. So, but if you write to me and give a good reason why you should try this thing, and will give us feedback, because believe me, it's got some rough edges on it. But if you're that bold, you can do it. And if you want to try it, it is fun. It is fun to see your email all of a sudden drop to only the important stuff again, because I just love it.
Well, there you have it, folks. Jim, really appreciate you taking the time to chat about your journey, and I think we've learned a lot. So thanks very much.
Ryan, thank you so much.
Thank you all for watching.